to have in Hungary, so-called university doctorate, which I got on John Milton's Paradise Lost. So after that, I badly needed something new. And fortunately, the then head of the English department, then at that time we had no English department, I will come back to this, was ready to accept the idea that I would introduce at least some Canadian authors into the curriculum. And it was back in 1987 when I actually started to, no, 1986 when I started to teach a few classes on Canada. And the reason why, the actual reason was because a year earlier I was teaching Hungarian to international students, and among them there happened to be a very, very nice Canadian man. And he started to send me books by Margaret Atwood, I remember Robertson Davis, Alice Munro, and I could go down the list. And interestingly enough, yeah, it was a very personal thing, but I'm not going to go more into details, but I must admit, however, that I came to Canada in 1987 for the first time. I got kind of a grant through the Canadian Embassy in Hungary, and then I will stop being personal, but this young man happened to be here at McMaster teaching classics, Greek studies and drama, so I came to visit him. I never knew that I would come back to him, so thank you very much again. Then I started, the first course that I started to do was actually Introduction to Canadian Studies, by which I did a little bit of geography, history, multiculturalism, the problems, advantages, disadvantages, a little bit of art, painting, and so on. And this course actually has become mandatory for all the students who are English majors. And now you can imagine at my university, it's a basically a five-year study course, it means about 500 students. And there is not a single student who can get a degree in a BA in English without some knowledge about Canada. And I think this is something very good indeed. And then later on, I started to do a course that I call Landmarks in Canadian Literature #1, #2. And we start with Susan Moody, and we go sort of in a chronological order. It's both poetry and fiction, and we go up to quite modern, postmodern literature. And more students sign up for that course. The reason, in my case, what I have experienced is that, again, they have learned a lot about British and American literature, but Canadian literature is something new to them. Actually, my department is called the North American Studies Department, and North is just because of the Canadian component. And I don't know of any other universities, at least in Hungary, where you would have a department, the name of which would be North American. And interestingly enough, however, we teach Australian in the North American department. I don't know how it comes into the picture, but it is my colleagues who teach Australian happen to be there. So as I have already told you, I got to Canada 1987 for the first time through the Canadian Embassy for 6 weeks, where I was traveling around making contacts, writers, scholars, and I visited quite a few English departments. And this was the year I think I literally fell in love with Canada. Then a year later, 1988, 1989, I was very lucky to get a grant to go to Carleton University, where Carleton spent the last amount of time, and the English department, where I did sort of basic research, and where I could, how should I put it, could immerse myself into Canadian reality. I remember a wonderful Christmas, and it is to some extent linked to my research, about which I'll be telling more in a few minutes. A wonderful Christmas in North Hatley, and I was invited to spend this Christmas with Ronald, not the actor, but Ronald Sutherland, house in North Hatley, and outside Montreal, where this is a big family, and I was really struck by the fact that the members of the family kept switching back and forth between English and French, and I found that very interesting, indeed. On that particular 1988-1989, when I was here for 10 months a bus across Canada from Ottawa to Victoria Island, and many people were really shocked about why do you do this? Why do you take the bus? Why not the train? Number one, I have no money, and I think I found more interesting people on the bus. Why yeah, you know, there were some people who had no idea about it. They didn't, I don't want to offend anybody, but there were people who didn't know the very good literature. So when I got out to the Paris, I decided to say that I was interested in farming. And I'm not joking, and I could say that, you know, farming is very important in Hungary, actually. We live in, you know, it's an agricultural country, basically. So this is very, I don't regret, if I could jump on the bus, I would do it immediately. It was really very, very interesting for me. So when I got back, it was no longer just this introductory course, but I studied just a separate course on multiculturalism, one on regionalism, and one which is just Canadian poetry, and I have one which is more specialized, which is about how Canadian authors would relate themselves to their homeland. So when they don't talk about Canada, really, but for example, going to mystery, how he talks about India, or Michael Dachin running in the family, how he talks about Sri Lanka, and I could give you other examples. By the way, this area of my research will come out in a single volume in the near future. Going back to teaching, I have some colleagues who teach Canadian. I'm not a German person, but I have colleagues who teach Canadian German, and also some who would teach Canadian history. And we do this at 3 different levels, BA, MA, and also PhD. Having mentioned German, we have a sort of a small student group who would perform performance group. They put on stage quite a few Canadian dramas which were quite successful. As some of you have already mentioned, I think in our lives, the grants that we got from the ICC Acts are immensely important indeed. Without those grants, of the research and the enrichment grants, I don't think we could really survive. And it's really very sad that that we have to live through all these cutbacks. So I have been to Canada many, many times, and I feel that I am very, very lucky indeed. But not only have I been here in Canada, but I try to make the context, I try to use my context in a way that I invited quite a few authors coming to Canada, to Hungary, and among them, and without referring to them with importance, I just like to mention a few. We had among us Rudy we had Rita van Berg, we had David Anderson, we had Douglas Barber, we had Antonio D'Alfonso, we had Pablo O'Reilly, we had, I could go down the list, Mirna Kostas, and among the scholars we had David Sainz from University of Ottawa, we had Desmond Morton from the McMaster Institute for the Study of Canada in Montreal, where I happened to be a Seagram Fellow in 1996 for 8 months, which was again very, very useful. And at one point I was given the Foreign Speakers Program, which I found very, very useful, but it doesn't exist anymore either. Now going back to my personal experiences, when I had this wonderful Christmas in North Latin, I really got interested in bilingualism and how, whether the English language writing in Quebec still is flourishing, or because I think they are being silenced. But if you think about the history of Canadian literature, the big names like Irving Layton, Monica Richler, Hugh Hood, and Leonard Cohen, and we could go down the list, many of them would be located in Montreal. So I thought that it would be a field well worth researching. So here in Hamilton, you are going to discuss 2 authors. One of them would be David Hommel, and his novel is called Big, which came out in 2010. And the other Gail Scott and the novel is The Obituary. Both of them came out in the same year. Now I compared the to author's view of Montreal, I have become interested in the city, how the city is reflected upon, in particularly in these two cases, Montreal, Molna, another female author. And already, as many of you have pointed it out, it's very important to be here, despite the age of the internet and all the rest of it, to make personal contact. I have already learned while we were driven to campus, and Matthew said that his interest was in city writing, but he would concentrate more on how nature is present in the city, which I have never thought about. I'm not going to bore you right here, no pages, okay? It's just, after the never. And if you think about Montreal, with the mountain and all the rest of it, it's so already just a few words and there's a thought that will pop into your minds. So I wish to explore English language writing in Montreal, being a minority within a minority, and what it is like. Just another note, I was very happy. I had some time last afternoon and I was exploring a little bit of the city. And I really felt at home because one of the names is, street names is Franz Liszt, our composer, famous composer. And I was touched. And also because it's, I don't know, you may correct me, but I think it's about 2 years that our international airport has been named. The names have changed, and now it's Liszt. And now I come to Hamilton and I see Franz Liszt, so it's really, I feel already at home. So thank you very much.